As I'll show to you in a minute, for the last 40 years, Australia has been almost the #1 member of the Washington Consensus Club. You've probably all heard of the Washington Consensus, a suite of liberal economic policies. And we're at the front. We believed in it. We didn't just believe in it for the rest of the world, we believed in it for us as well. And that consensus said you should minimise the role of the state and maximise the role of market forces in managing your economy. But that has changed in the last few years, and we want to understand why. Why has the Australian government sought to intervene, or seen the need to intervene more and more in the economy in contradiction to that legacy? And as we will see, the answer to that question is China, by and large. Right? That there are growing concerns, and this is the argument I'll present to you today, that there are new vulnerabilities, new fragilities that arise from our economic interdependence, our economic relationship with China, and more broadly, the geopolitical rivalry that is now dominant in international relations today. These phenomena have challenged this emphasis on the market and caused governments to say, no, we need a bit more of the state when we think about how to manage our economy. There are 3 shocks in particular that I will talk about. One, growing concerns about foreign interference from Chinese actors in Australian politics. 2, the widely publicised campaign of economic sanctions, economic coercion, that Australia suffered beginning in 2020. And 3, the COVID-19 shock and the fragilities in supply chains that revealed. Each of these 3 things has contributed to a reassessment inside Australian government circles, policy elites, that we need new approaches to managing that relationship because of the security risks that interdependence carries with it. We chart that. But we also find that actually the extent to which we have seen concrete policy change is limited. It's limited to foreign investment policy, supply chain management, some in industry policy, and some areas of foreign economic policy. But where it has not changed, where we still are happy with the market, is in trade. And I'll show you how our trading relationship with China has recovered since the relationship with Beijing has stabilised. And I'm going to finish the presentation by talking about how our experience is relevant to you all and to anyone who has interest in the broader international order. Now, before I tell this story, a few definitions if you are unfamiliar with this domain. Economic statecraft, it's in the title of our academic article, is when governments use economic policy instruments for non-economic reasons, right, to exercise power in international relations. And that was a definition that was devised in the 1980s. I now tend to think of myself working in the field of geoeconomics, sort of the modern 2020 version of economic statecraft, which has 2 components to it. First, the economic statecraft component, the intentional use by governments of economic policy instruments to achieve national security and geopolitical objectives. Right? So economic policy is still for non-economic reasons. But the second half, in many ways the more interesting one, actually no, they're not interesting, but this is also interesting, is the reality that economic activity happening out there in the world every day, from firms and consumers and governments, increasingly generates national security and geopolitical consequences for the rest of the world. So economic choices motivated by economic incentives, but they have nothing to do with national security, nevertheless have downstream consequences for national security that governments are increasingly paying attention to, especially, of course, in Beijing and Washington. Now, there's a broad definition. For you guys, I might carve a few more distinctions in what economic statecraft looks like in a concrete sense. So, foreign economic statecraft, sanctions, right? The original form of economic statecraft that go back to the Peloponnesian War and Thucydides. FTAs, free trade agreements. Foreign aid, of course, is economic statecraft. Export controls, limiting the exports, and we'll talk a bit about those perhaps later. But importantly, in this world, domestic policy is also a form of economic statecraft. Countries are pursuing economic policies at home motivated by national security reasons. Industrial policy and investment restrictions are the two big examples. We can also distinguish between offensive and defensive forms of economic statecraft. Offensive is when you are trying to affect someone else. You're trying to put pressure on them. Think of economic sanctions by the US on Russia. You want to create the political pressure to hopefully get them to withdraw from Ukraine. Or perhaps you're trying to affect the other side's material capabilities. Economic warfare, this used to be called, where you're limiting their access to material capabilities. Export controls being the best example. The US denies semiconductor technology to China. That is designed to slow their military development, right? It's not trying to change their behaviour like coercion does. It's actually trying to slow their material capabilities. That's offensive. And the defensive form is really the response to these things, where you are trying to neutralise the risks posed by economic ligature, neutralise the security downsides. So if you're looking to diversify your trade relationships so you don't have those choke points